Okay, we're going to call the meeting to order. It's October the 9th. It's a little after 1 p.m. And the first thing we're going to do is a Pledge of Allegiance, and Sam Couchman is going to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Sam, and Director Hanks will be joining us a little bit later. Okay, Mr. Garber, was any action taken in closed session?
No, sir.
All right. We're going to have a motion for the approval of the order and the agenda items.
So move.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, please vote. Okay, thank you. We're going to move on to public comments. So if anybody from the public has any comments, please step to the podium, state your name for the record, and you have 5 minutes, and the clock's over here.
Larry Cox, Farmer Brawling. This won't take 5 minutes. Yesterday at the Farm Bureau board meeting, a motion was passed. It reads that it was moved and seconded the Imperial County Farm Bureau recommend to the IID Board of Directors that they adopt and implement Charles Dumar's Plan B as presented without hesitation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cox. Mr. Light?
Would this be appropriate time to address the solar?
We're going to have 3 solar projects on information, but if you want to say something about solar right now, you can do that.
Okay.
Or you can come back when the issue comes up, whichever you prefer.
Okay, very good.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else from the public, please step to the podium. Got Mr. Ramos, you're up, and then Mr. Gonzalez. Anybody else has any comments, they can get in line over here by the door.
Yeah, Tony Ramos, Central resident. I got a flyer here, people, that says trips to Las Vegas, Lakers games, National Finals, Rodeo, NASCAR races, all paid for by you. This is meaning that it was paid for by us, the taxpayers, and they throw this at my friends here, Stella Mendoza and Jean-Pierre Menville. It's a bunch of lies. And it says here that IB First sponsored it. How could IB First, representing what's righteous and what's right about farming, ever come up with a ridiculous flyer like this? And I show it to the people out there looking at this on channel 10 or 75, whatever channel it is, in the next week. A bunch of lies. How can you vote for people that are against these, like Bruce Kuhn and Steve Benson, to attack the character of these 2 people here? I mean, if you're going to go into politics, at least have some basis, some recognition, some truth to it. There's a bunch of lies, dirty work. And IB First and the people who represent them, like CoLab and Imperial Group and everybody else, should be ashamed of that, because you don't let other people do dirty work for you and then cross your hands and say, well, I didn't do it, they did it. And you know, JP and Stella can stand for themselves. I was there at that debate last Thursday. And I asked Lindsay Dale if I could talk about this. She never let me talk. I was one of the first ones to put my name on a piece of paper, and 2 other people went behind me. She never let me talk. That was her deal. And that's why I say that you guys went, and you guys did very good. And to me, you know, it's just dirty politics. That's all it is. Y le digo a la gente mexicana que no les crean a estas gentes que le están pidiendo su voto, porque es una bola de mentirosos, aprovechados, no dicen la verdad. Y hablo en español para la gente que no habla inglés. Que no voten por el señor Kuhn y el señor Benson, porque ellos están con estas gentes que echan mentiras contra estos candidatos, estas gentes que se pueden defender. No necesito defenderlo, digo, ellos se defienden, pero se van a defender cuando ustedes voten con ellos y ganemos el noviembre 6. The other thing, JP, I commend you and I applaud you for your article on Sunday. It says, don't let this group fool you. There are really 1% of the landowners who are trying to take over the ID by spending thousands of dollars to lie distort facts, and confuse voters so they can steal our precious resource, the water that belongs to all of us. And on top of that, you got Bio Ranches, $10,000. Victor Rambo, $10,000. Black Dog Farms, $5,000. El Toro Land and Cattle, $5,000. Elmore, $5,000. Famous Farms. Is that Famous Days or Famous Farms? Okay, Famous Days. They're not into the barbecue thing right now. And Jack Brothers, $5,000. Jerry Priest, $5,000. Lawrence Cox Ranches, $5,000. Mad Jack Farms Incorporated, Jim Abadi, $5,000. And Mike Abadi, $5,000. Mike Abadi is the same guy that put that sign up against JP. And you know what? I don't like to take jabs at people, but somebody said that the guy that got in the pad looks like me. Well, it looks like more like Mr. Abadi himself, the senior Abadi, because he's got those big glasses. He looks more like him, and I don't mean that to say derogatory, but I mean, if you're going to pull someone against me, then I'm going to throw it back at you. And Abadi, Mr. Mike Abadi, you really did a favor for your father by putting him in a platter like that. It doesn't look like me at all. Besides, he looks more white than he does Mexican. So to me, you want to throw jabs, I'm going to throw them back at you too. There's a fine line when you say, let's keep family out of it. But this is a joke, let's put it into a joke. And people's character and well-being, if this wasn't because of people would probably end up taking people to court on this. And I don't like taking people to court, and I never will. My court is a court of justice, a court of law. They say that in this world, we should love and fear God. You know why you should fear God? Because God stands against what is not right, against lies and deception, against people that are telling lies about people. That's what they did to God. And guess who won out? God won out all over everybody. And that's what's going to happen on November 6th, ladies and gentlemen. Le digo a la gente de comunidad mexicana y americana, también los que no les hagan caso a estas gentes, todo lo que quieren es agarrar su voto ahorita, el rato se los van a mandar a la fregada. No quieren nada ver con ustedes. ¿Cuántas veces han ido ustedes al Farm Bureau aquí en el centro? Yo nunca he ido allá al Farm Bureau. Ni sé cómo se mira adentro y ni quiero ir porque no tiene nada que ver con nosotros. I tell you people, don't listen to Ivy First, don't listen to Steve Benson, don't listen to Bruce Kuhn, because all they're out there is to get the money to get paid directly when they transfer the water. And once that happens, we're not going to be able to do nothing about it. Keep in mind that Stella Mendoza and Jean-Pierre Memo had nothing to gain by this. All they got to gain is a trust you're going to put into them so they can protect your rights and carry on with the water that belongs to all of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Ramos. Mr. Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mr. Ramos. Oscar Gonzalez, Calexico. Ladies and gentlemen and board, I want to speak to the audience, the people that watch me on TV every Monday, the people that watch Channel 10 at 6 o'clock. I finally saw myself. And lady, the manager of McDonald's at the Walmart told me, hey, Oscar, you know what? I'd love to see you because you speak for me and a lot of people. That's what I've heard for the last, I don't know how many years. But I'm speaking to that audience tonight. I'm speaking because they're listening. I urge you to vote for JP Menville and Estela Mendoza. The reason that I say that you should speak with them, Bruce Kuhn sold us out 75 years. He voted for the water transfer. Later on, he and Rudy Maldonado said they made a mistake. That's a costly mistake that I can't forgive. So I hope and I urge everybody listening to me on TV, vote for Estela Mendoza, vote for John Pierre. I want you to understand, don't take it personal. Don't make assumptions of Oscar. There's a lot of misconceptions, but I speak from my heart. And I'm going to tell you 40 years that I've had Modesto, Turlock, Sacramento, Santa Maria, Santa Barbara. It's my opinion that right now, Estela Mendoza, we got about 5 minutes to go in the last quarter. You're ahead by 1 touchdown. And Mr. Menville, you got 1st and 10 on the 20-yard line, and you guys are tied. The guy that voted for the water transfer, you got 1st and 10 on the 10-yard line, and you're tied. So if I were to bet on a horse, like Spot Moreno, the late Spot Moreno from Calexico, he would say, bet on the horse you think's going to come in. And I know you're going to come in, Mr. Menville, and I know, Estela, you're going to come in. Largely because people understand the significance of this race. Many farmers, not all of them, are greedy. I don't know if Mr. Cox, I don't know if Mr. Mike Morgan or anybody else, if they're greedy. I know that I worked for Mike Morgan during the water transfer, and he paid me handsomely. But he told me, oh, I'm surprised you switched. I switched because there was a contractual disagreement between Mr. Benson and I, and the same thing with Mr. Kuhn. And by the way, Mr. Kuhn was served by mail last week on the small claims, and I'm going to beat him because I've got people that I introduced, both of them. They were there, and they're all going to be subpoenaed that we met, and I charge $150 an hour, ladies and gentlemen. I'm not free, and they don't want to pay. That's fine. We'll let the judge determine. If Mr. Kuhn wants to sue me Superior Court, I don't have diddly. He's going to have to find or mail me the thing. But I may or may not show up in Superior Court. But if I get $7,000, I ain't gonna show up to any lawsuit that Mr. Kuhn. But I'll say this to the audience that's watching me on TV tonight: vote for Mr. John Pierre Menville and Estela Mendoza because they want to keep water rates down. They want jobs, and they want to make sure that people, if we sell the water, it stays here. I think Kuhn showed already his colors. I'm not surprised that farmers are backing him. I mean, can you imagine 75 years and they're voting for mediocrity? They already know where he stands. Mr. Men, I know you weren't here, but Estela didn't vote for the water transfer, but they want Estela. Why? I don't know. She was the first Mexican-American female to be elected on this Board of Supervisors, unless they're macho dogs, you know, chauvinist pigs. Maybe that's what they are. They can't see a Mexican female. Mr. Benson told me one time, you know, Oscar, she's Republican and she's a Buddha, so what? So what? She's got freedom of speech, you know. That's why, in conclusion, I want to talk about Ruben Casares. I hope, I know it's going through the process. In 1850, the Americans came with a treaty with Guadalupe Hidalgo, and it basically said any Mexican that stays here can be a citizen, language, culture, etc. Today is, this month is anti-bullying. That's why I'm wearing orange. Thank you.
Your time's up. Thank you, Oscar. Anybody else have any public comments? Please step to the podium, state your name for the record. Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board. We'll start. Do you have any comments, Director Desert?
No comments today.
Director Mendoza?
No comments.
Okay, well, I have a few comments. And I made some comments at the forum at the CoLab and IV, Pearl Valley Vegetable Growers, and the Farm Bureau had, where they did send this flyer out. And I went to all the households here in the valley. And the comment that I wanted to make on this is they say, they got in here, they say fact. They've given themselves salaries and benefits of over $160,000 per year for a part-time job. And I've got my W-2 form right here that I got for 2011. And I get paid $52,968.19. That's my salary that gets reported to the IRS and the State of California Franchise Tax Board. So my salary is $52,968.19. They say here that I'm making $160,000 a year for a part-time job. They say in here that I get medical benefits for life. As soon as I'm off this board, my medical benefits stop. IID is paying for them right now. I've hardly ever used the medical plan. I'm a very healthy guy. And then the other thing is they have here that we have a lucrative pension for life. And we're with a Vanguard plan here. The IID puts in 7% of our gross salary. They match it. And I've got about, on the IID side, they put in, for 7.5 years on the board, I got about $28,000 in the account, Vanguard account. When I'm gone from this board, it stops. That's it. It's over with. There's no lucrative pension for life sitting on this board. There's no medical benefits for life. There's no $160,000 a year for a part-time job. Then they've got in here that we get a generous expense accounts. I've asked Miss Gloria Rivera to go back from the day I got on this board, and she said by the middle of next week she'll have it added up as to how much money I've spent on my generous, lucrative expense account. and which is not very much. Then they've got in here that we go to the Lakers games, we go to NASCAR races, we go to the National Final Rodeos in Las Vegas. I have been to the National Final Rodeos one time about 3 years ago. Wasn't paid for by the IID. I went with Laura McDonald and Buzz Schott with San Diego Gas and Electric. It's the only time I've ever been to the National Final Rodeo. Never been to a Lakers game, never been to a NASCAR race. As a matter of fact, I haven't even been to Vegas in 3 years. So they say these are facts. These are lies. These people are sending this information out. They're lying. They're sending these mailers out. And I went down and checked on the 460 form that Pearl Valley first filed Friday. They raised another $115,000. They have raised a total, since their campaign started with their super PAC, they've raised $234,000 to try to buy 2 seats on this board to control the Imperial Valley and control the water rights of this board. I printed a list of the guys and who they are in the newspaper. Some of them are sitting in this room today. And it's very unfortunate that they're doing what they're trying to do. And we'll just see how this thing shakes out. But the public better be aware of what's going on here. And to raise that kind of money to try to knock 2 candidates off this board is a very unfortunate thing for this valley. And that's the end of my comments. Okay. We're going to move on to the general manager. You have any comments?
No, nothing.
Mr. Garber, you have any comments?
No, sir.
Thank you. We'll move into the consent. Is there a motion to approve the consent?
Move to approve.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
All right, please vote. All right, thank you. Then we're going to move right into the informational item. And it's number 6 is first up, and it's going to be an update by Attorney David Osias on a quantification settlement agreement, litigation, and status report on a state board petition. Mr. Osias.
Good afternoon. David Osias, one of your outside counsel. It's a pleasure to be here again and in open session. I wanted to discuss with you briefly and then respond to any questions you might have, sort of touching on the following basic topics around litigation. Will I be able to change slides with this? Okay. Yep. Let's go back. Yep. So I want to let you know sort of what's pending, who's involved, what's at stake, and where we are and where we might end up. So first, this is the cases in sort of non-technical descriptions. We left off the captions. We haven't given you the case numbers. And we've used sort of common shorthands. But this is what's still pending. You have the QSA cases, which went back to Sacramento after the appeal. That's a collection of consolidated cases. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. We have not a lawsuit at the moment. It's a petition before the state board that's pending in Sacramento. There's a case we call the Morgan Western Farms cases, which is pending in Imperial County. There's an appeal by the Air District of their loss in a lawsuit challenging the state board approval. There's an appeal by the county and the Air District from their loss in federal district court of their challenge to the Department of Interior's environmental compliance. There's a lawsuit pending in San Francisco between San Diego Met and IID on the side of San Diego with respect to the rates that are charged for transporting water through their system. And then there's an appeal by Morgan Group with respect to your rate setting for water rates that's pending in San Diego. So I'll touch on each of those a little bit more now. So in Sacramento, we have a 4-day trial coming up. It's scheduled to commence shortly, November 13th. Opening briefs have been filed, and our response briefs are due October 12th. This is, again, the continuation of the trial that got disrupted by the judgment on constitutionality, which judgment was reversed on appeal. The appellate court sent it back to be finished. So who's opposing the IID in this case? The county through Mr. Rossman, the Air District through Ms. Tabor, the Morgan Holtz parties through the Maloney Law Firm, Barioni parties through Mr. Sutherland, Quattro Del Mar through Ms. McKeith, and a entity known as Power by Ms. Zoya. What are they alleging in this phase of the lawsuit? Well, they're hoping to convince the trial court of the following. They want this new judge to believe that Judge Candy guaranteed that the QSA would not ever reduce water for farming. That's just not true. Judge Candy said nothing of the sort. They're trying to convince the judge that the QSA was never approved by the IID. That's not correct either. They're alleging that the IID violated the Brown Act. That's incorrect, but even if it's not, the remedy is not invalidation. Most Brown Act violations are ministerial errors and do not result in the invalidity of contracts. And then they're challenging the adequacy of the environmental review for the QSA, alleging that it didn't comply with the law. We believe that's incorrect also, but again, the proper remedy is not invalidation. Generally, it's curative in terms of adding additional environmental studies. So that trial, as I said on the previous slide, will commence in November. This judge and these issues in this case cause us to believe that we won't have a decision this calendar year. It'll be more likely in the first quarter of 2013. We expect, based on past behavior, that if we're successful on the remaining issues, there will be an appeal by the losing side, since there has been an appeal on everything else. State Board petition. So first bullet is just to quickly remind you, what is the State Board petition about? It was filed by IID and San Diego to approve, have the State Board approve, a change in the mitigation strategy for QSA impacts on the Salton Sea during years 2014 to 2017. That's what the petition asks for. What's the change that's being proposed? The second bullet summarizes that succinctly. It's to change spending the money that would otherwise be spent fallowing water and putting it in the sea, which totals $61 million, as you can see, to instead spend that on creating habitat and to implement dust control strategies, since putting water into the sea does little to prevent future dust control problems and does little to prevent or to create future habitat. The water in the sea has a benefit of only a couple years of upside until we end up right back to where we would otherwise be. So that's the request. The hearing is anticipated mid next year. It cannot occur until the environmental documents studying the potential impacts of this requested change are completed. We hope to have a draft out in mid-December, and numerous parties, almost all of those who whoops, I don't know how I did that. The parties who've opposed virtually everything else have filed positions with the State Board reserving their right to oppose the petition when we have the hearing. So the next case is what we call the Western Farm cases, and the purpose of that lawsuit is to unwind the purchase, I think the purchase in 2004, of IID's buying the Western Farms land, the majority of which has already been sold by the IID, but still that's what the case is about. Two theories: that in buying the land, IID did not comply with CEQA, and that IID is not allowed to buy land. It's ready for trial, has been for a long, long time. Pretty close to final resolution of that case. The judge was challenged by the Morgan Holtz parties and disqualified, so we're waiting for a new judge, and we anticipate a relatively quick trial. In addition to the QSA case, there are two other lawsuits pending involving the Air District and the county. As I said at the beginning, one is an action at the appellate court, not an action, it's the appeal of the trial court's dismissal of the Air District's lawsuit challenging the state board approval of the QSA. So, not to create a deja vu, but the state board approved the QSA in 2002. They sued. Their case was dismissed. They appealed. It's fully briefed, and we're awaiting oral argument for resolution of that appeal. The other is also an appeal. The federal government signed an agreement with IID in San Diego and others, and before they could do that, they had to do environmental review. And the county and the Air District, that review was done in 2003. They signed the agreement in 2003. The county and the Air District sued in 2009. And it went to trial in the federal district court, and the Air District and the county lost, and they've appealed that, and that's still pending. So there are two cases now in San Francisco that are consolidated, and there's two because they deal with separate years. One is the rate for 1 year, and the other is the rate for the other year. How should Met calculate what to charge for moving water through its system that San Diego is acquiring from IID? If the outcome is in favor of Met and adverse to San Diego, it can shorten the QSA from 45 years to 35 years, and it can affect, and that's San Diego's election, and if it's not shortened, it could affect the price that San Diego pays us starting in year 2037. So we had to fight to have a seat at that table, which we won, and so that case is pending in San Francisco. It's not close to trial, and it's actually at its fairly early stages. We have the Morgan water rate appeal, and in that action, Morgan and others challenged the IID water rate increase that was approved by this board in 2009 and sought a refund of all the water rates paid since then, and a prohibition against charging for water until IID can prove it properly measures its deliveries. IID prevailed at trial. That is now on appeal. All the briefing is completed, and we're waiting for an oral argument date for that. So what's sort of a quick summary of that for the moment? There's about 20 lawsuits filed against IID by a common group of landowners in the county and the Air District. So far, all the ultimate decisions have been in IID's favor. Now, I have to use the word ultimate because, as you know, Judge Candy ruled against us on an important issue and ultimately was ruled to be wrong by the appellate court. IID filed, on the other hand, one lawsuit which had a very limited scope. It was to determine that the contracts are valid. Nothing else was sought. The issues decided so far about validity have all been in IID's favor, but we have some left to try, and again, that's what's going to happen in November. So why are we litigating so hard, and why do we litigate with the goal of winning? And I've read what I've put up on the slide, stated by various folks. When IID's in litigation, it makes it treat the other people on the other side as the enemy. The second quote sort of suggests that important policy things shouldn't be decided by the courts. People have suggested, why haven't these disputes been settled? And I thought it'd be important to at least address these briefly by identifying what's at stake in these lawsuits that have gone on, policy issues of fundamental importance that frankly needed to be resolved. They were brought to you by other people. So, for example, Mike Morgan and 21 others, which I'll show you on the next slide, asked the court to determine that the landowners own and control the water rights, not the IID. Court denied that request. Here's the list of the people who sought that.
Can we go back? Let me finish reading the list.
I've sent a list of this, a copy of this to your general counsel. Go on. Mike Morgan and 21 others asked the court to return the water rights to the landowners. Court denied that request. It's similar but not identical list. Jimmy Abadi and 7 others asked the court to issue an order barring IID from making any water deliveries to local cities or businesses, claiming IID was legally barred from delivering water to Valley residents who were not agricultural landowners. Court denied that request. These are sort of fundamental. Mike Morgan and 11 others asked the court to determine that the IID could not conserve water and transfer it without the express permission of the landowners. By the way, you'll notice I have numbers next to each of these. I've given you a list of the documents that contain these requests. Here's the group that asked for that.
Excuse me, is that John R. Benson? Is that Steve Benson's family? Is that his father?
I don't know.
Oh, okay.
We just pulled these off of the pleadings or the letters or the trial briefs. Okay. The Imperial Group, a more amorphous list, demanded that the U.S. Department of Interior acknowledge that the public benefit that is to be generated by the IID is only for the landowners and not for the residents. The Department of Interior ignored that. Imperial Group, at least as of April 15, 2003, about the time that letter was sent, was this lengthy list, which is too hard to read on the screen. Similarly, they demanded the Department of Interior acknowledge that Valley farmers are like field hands, tractor technicians, and fertilizer salesmen and have no water rights like the landowners do. Again, a very narrow view of what they think the IID and its rights are vis-a-vis controlling and owning the water rights. Mike Morgan and 92 others asked the court to cause all the money paid to IID for conserved water to be distributed only to landowners. Court denied that request. Okay, now 92 is a lot of people, so I don't know that we should spend too much time memorizing it.
I just thought of something. So what they couldn't do during the court process, they're trying to do through the political process. What an idea.
They also asked the court to prohibit any money paid to IID for conserved water to be used for environmental or socioeconomic mitigation. Okay, court denied that request. Mike Morgan and the 2 Emanuelis asked the court to find that the electrical assets of the IID exist only to benefit the landowners, and thus IID should be compelled to sell the electrical assets to benefit the landowners. Court denied that request. Same group asked the court to determine that IID cannot utilize the power assets to benefit electrical ratepayers. Benefit is only for landowners. Court denied that request. Mike Morgan, Walter Holtz, and 19 others asked the court to order the IID to pay the landowners $25 billion for injury to the water rights claimed to be owned by the landowners. Court denied that request. Here's the 19 others. So we spent a lot of time over the years talking about these lawsuits. And as I said on that slide about eight or so ago, people wonder why we aren't settling them or why we're in court rather than resolving these fundamental policy issues elsewhere. First of all, these challenges were brought to the IID, and they're essentially fundamental to what the IID could do. This board rightfully said, oppose those and try to prevail. So, although it seems fantastical that such outrageous claims would be made, they were. And we've got a little list at the end here. Each footnote is to a source document where the request can be found. Now, there have been other costs, and there's a typo. Leaving out the IID, not C, costs for attorney's fees, even though we've won these lawsuits, and some of your attorney's fees have been covered by insurance, and a lot, frankly, has been covered by insurance. You've lost over $130 million through construction delay costs and the opportunity to finance some of your power plants using a federal bond program that was delayed by a lawsuit that was dismissed, and you lost a favorable interest rate. It cost you $130 million in real dollars. So not only are they fundamental policy things, but they've had a serious impact on the IID. So here's a list of the documents that contain those claims I put up. The good news is the IID board's power and jurisdiction, which is set by the water code, is intact. Okay? And you hold the water rights in trust for the benefit and purpose of what an irrigation district is, which is to serve its community. And we have whittled these down so that, as you could see from the beginning slide, what's left in front of the courts is less, much less than what we've accomplished to date. Okay? But we're not done. We have those cases to finish, and hopefully they'll come out as successfully. As I said, there does not seem to be much give up in this series of challenges. Every loss has been appealed, and so I expect as we finish the QSA trial and then a decision comes out next year, there will be some more appeals. If the state board approves the petition, there's a right to sue to challenge the state board approval, and then if that doesn't go well, a right to appeal that challenge. As you know, maybe, I shouldn't say maybe, I know you know, but the public may not. After the appellate court reversed Judge Candie, the losers on appeal, the winners in the trial court, asked the California Supreme Court to reverse the appellate court. They turned the case down, and then they asked the U.S. Supreme Court to reverse the appellate court. And the U.S. Supreme Court turned that case down about 3 or 4 weeks ago. So exhaustion of the legal process, or exhaustion, depending on which synonym you wish, seems to be the route that these challenges take. That's where we are. I do think over the next several years, these cases will run their course. I have no reason to be optimistic that new ones won't be filed, but I am hopeful on your behalf that they are not. And I'm open for questions.
I would like to make a comment that at the debate that was hosted last week by the vegetable growers, COLAB, and the Farm Bureau, one of the questions that was asked is, would you fire David Osias? My answer was, hell no, I would not fire David Osias. He's won every lawsuit for the protection of the IID and the water rights. And this is the reason why this board should not fire him. He's a very intelligent attorney, very knowledgeable, and he is protecting the IID and our water rights. And that's why, as long as I'm on this board, I will keep him to keep on protecting the IID. Thank you, David.
Thank you. That's very kind.
Okay, Director Desert, you have any questions?
No, not this time.
David, I appreciate you coming down. I'm going to open it up for the public. And I know I asked you the question because I know the mood is out there on the people that have been suing the IID, and you've been protecting the IID over 10 years since the lawsuits got started. They want to get rid of you. And I asked the question at a library meeting, what happens if the makeup of this board does change to where there's 3 votes to fire you or your firm, and have a change in the legal status of protecting the IID, and what's going on here with protecting Imperial Valley and the people, and et cetera. So that question was put out there, and it's out there. Do you want to have any comments on that question?
Well, there's really 2 questions wrapped into one. One is, what happens if they fire us, our law firm? And the question that's part of that is, I suppose, and stop effectively defending these kind of challenges. Okay, I mean, you know, we think of ourselves as relatively expert and accomplished in this area, but we're not the only good lawyers in the state of California. So if the real question is, if the IID doesn't vigorously defend itself, what could happen? Well, any of those losses would dramatically change what IID does, okay? And who it does it for and how it does it. And that change is, I assume, viewed by the challengers as being in their best interest, okay? And there's a list of them. But it's not perceived by the IID board to be in the community's best interest, and so they've opposed them. I think if they keep bringing challenges like that, our advice is to the IID elected board, who's elected by the population at large, to continue to oppose them, and with vigor, not just mildly, because those are very fundamental, key, defining roles that the IID board plays, and I don't think you want to relinquish them to a group of landowners or anyone else. So although it's nice, both Director Mendoza's comments and yours, I know, sort of link the ability to defend the IID with me and my firm, I'm not so egocentric to claim that we're the only ones who could do it effectively. You actually have law and facts on your side. That's quite helpful.
No, they're not, and I appreciate that answer. And you're not the only law firm. There's other law firms out there. You just happen to be the law firm that handled this situation when the QSA was going down, you know, part of the dream team.
Right.
And if they change law firms, they change law firms. My concern is that if they change law firms, are they going to follow what the will of the people is and what the IID is all about, right, representing the Imperial Valley and taking care of the Imperial Valley.
And so these are the QSA lawsuits. Now, you know, we had a presentation a long time ago, and we could do it again if you wish, that prior to the QSA, we had a big lawsuit, you know, against the United States and others who were, which didn't involve the QSA, it involved IID's water rights and whether they should be reduced for free. And we litigated on your behalf successfully until it was settled with the QSA, that kind of challenge. So, you know, you have internal challenges and you have external challenges, and you're trying to be in the sweet spot of making everybody happy. And that's not so easy, and that's a political path that you need to chart. But when people try to either take or reduce your water rights on the one hand, or take or reduce your ability to be in control of your water rights, I think the IID board has historically acted to defend its role, and I think that's the right path for you to take as a lawyer. I'll leave the political process for you to figure out.
Okay, well, thank you for that. And the main reason that we asked you to come in here was to be transparent. Mr. Gonzalez, just a moment. Be transparent about the lawsuits that are going to Sacramento, and also about the state board petition, to bring us up to speed on where that thing's at, because I did have people from the public ask that for you to inform us and educate us what's going on with the Sacramento cases and the state board petition. So at this time, we'll take some questions from the public. If anybody in the public has any questions for Mr. Osias, please step to the podium. Go ahead, Mr. Gonzalez. You're up first, and then Tom, you're up second. If anybody has any questions, just please
You know, I
go
think
over.
Mr. Oscar Gonzalez collects, I think you answered the question I was going to ask you. How much is it costing? 130 million. But the bottom line is it's costing taxpayers, And I'm not surprised that farmers, an elitist group, less than 1%, has spent so much money. I don't know how much they've spent, and I don't give a rat's ass what they spend, because they've got buku money. But it's interesting that adults that are supposed to, they give examples and give advice to their kids. I would hate to be their sons and daughters, People like that are evil. I think that, Mr. Desert, are you in favor of firing Mr. Osias?
At this time, we're going forward with the QSA as the board voted for.
I hope you're
Oscar.
not, because you're running in 2 years. Mr. Hanks is too.
Yes, Oscar, I am running in
Yeah.
2 years.
And we have somebody already in mind running in that district from Calexico.
You always do, Oscar.
Huh?
You always do.
No, I don't.
You always have somebody.
No. I'm telling, but I'm not going to give you the name. You'll be surprised who it is. But anyway,
Oscar, say your piece, but don't
Yeah,
get in any
thank
arguments,
you.
please.
yeah, he's probably in favor. The fact that he didn't answer, he's in favor, Estela and Mr. Menville. But that's okay. We expect it from a white guy. And, ni modo, that's life. But you haven't done anything in 2 years. You just sit there. You're no different than Anthony Sanchez. You're taller, you're a bully, but you're no different than Anthony Sanchez.
And you're the same also, Oscar.
But I'm not elected.
Oscar, move on. We're
But
here
anyway,
on
Mr.
Mr.
Osias, I
Osias'
want to
issue.
congratulate you to find out that every time Morgan and his the Waltons have lost, and I hope we keep you for the benefit of the community, for the benefit of people that pay. I don't think the farmers have ever wondered where their next meal is coming from. My people have, even right now. But by golly, they pay their bills, and they're hard workers. Farmers wouldn't have anything if it weren't for Mexican people in Imperial County. I wondered this. I was thinking, I said, I wonder what would happen if we boycott farmers. What would happen to stop? Because it's tragic, a tragedy at hand, what they've done. But anyway, Mr. Osias, I want to congratulate you. That's independent that you're a Jew, and I think you're very smart. And I'm glad that you have articulated and will continue to articulate. And I thank you on behalf of the people that are watching this program, because it is a program. Mexican people watch it at 6 o'clock, Channel 10 every Monday. And in Calexico, you better believe Benson and Kuhn aren't going to win. And I'll bet anybody, I'll bet beans against dollars, that Benson and Kuhn will not win in November. They have money. They spent over $250,000, but I'll bet you anything. I know Calexico. I was born and raised there. And we're going to win, Estela and Mr. Menville. You're going to win, both of you. They can spend $1 million. Thank you, Mr. Osias, for helping these two guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Oscar. Tom, you're up next.
Tom Sefton Brawley. A couple of questions for Mr. Osias. I was not aware of some of the things you presented in some of the lawsuits that have been brought against IID water rights, and those are indeed concerning. I wanted to ask you a couple of questions about something earlier in your presentation. About the petition to the State Water Resources Control Board. You made a statement, in essence, saying that the water deliveries to the Salton Sea up through 2017, which would be essentially from 2014 through 2017, would have no substantial benefit in reducing dust blowing off of the exposed playa, and that things would return to prior conditions within a couple of years. I'd like to give you an opportunity to explain the basis of that statement, if you would, because I don't really follow how that's true.
So the very short answer is the environmental document, which isn't finished, is looking at that and will have great detail. Basis of my statement is that since 2003 through 2012, the transfers out of the Salton Sea Basin have been mitigated on a what we call a bucket for bucket, meaning in a like amount. Any water that otherwise would have flowed into the sea as drainage from a transfer out of the basin is put into the sea through additional conserved water being created by fallowing, so that there is no reduction in flow to the sea caused by the transfer. Notwithstanding that, the sea has continued to go down, which is caused by a variety of other circumstances, and the sea has continued to get more salty, which is caused by one circumstance, evaporation. Salt goes in and doesn't leave. The benefit wears off from the 4 years of water that are the subject of the petition, as you described, in a couple of years, because of those causes. The evaporation will continue, so the habitat will degrade, and the sea will continue to shrink for the reasons it was shrinking when we were putting the water in. Plus, it'll then start shrinking faster because we'll stop putting water in under the existing mitigation plan, which has that stopping in 2018. So rather than stopping in 2018, the request is to stop it in 2014, because you can do a lot more dust control and habitat creation for $61 million, and it'll last a lot longer than a couple of years. It's to spend the money on the same benefits more prudently. So that's how I'd answer that.
Thanks. Do you know whether that money will and can be spent to effectively reduce those effects of additional playa exposed, additional dust blowing, and the fact that the fish population dies essentially 4 years earlier than it otherwise would? Do we know that that $61 million that can be saved from paying farmers to fallow ground can actually make the difference to cover the impacts of reducing that water flow?
The strategy for spending that money is under development, and we are aware of different pilot projects for different purposes that work. So, for example, in some places, we've tried what's called moat and row air mitigation, which is to have sort of furrows to break the wind fetch so the dust doesn't blow and disrupt the salt. We know that works in some places. Doesn't have quite the same habitat value. So we also have had pilot projects that involve ponds, and we know wet ponds don't have blowing dust and create habitat. And so we've been working on, not me, it's not a lawyer thing, but engineers and things, are working on the best combination of size, depth, and cost for the habitat ponds. We know that in some places, because of the geology of the slopes, geology is probably the wrong word, geography of the slope and the chemical composition of the salt, that if left undriven across or walked across, it will form a crust and not blow. So there's a variety of approaches with different cost benefits, and the exact mix is something that's going to be taken up with the state board after the environmental review, which looks at all that, is completed. What we have, I guess the short answer is, a variety of techniques which will work at different costs for different purposes. Air mitigation and habitat are not the same thing. And we also know that the status quo does not work. That is, the Salton Sea continues to degrade as a habitat and shrink. And if the water into the sea is the only mitigation tool that we're using, then we're going to be slower to develop and implement these other tools than the petition asks for, which is to start doing it 4 years sooner.
David, stay up there, that other mic, in case there's other
this one?
question. Yeah, please.
I'm sorry, there's one other question. Is this one on? How do we know we have the 61 million? And the answer is it comes from the QSA parties. So we know we have it.
So essentially, we have a number of proposals, and we hope that that 61 million will be enough to make a difference. But right now, there's no real evaluation of whether the 61 million would offset the damage done by cutting off that water flow sooner. That's what I get from what you've told me.
Well, we're
correct.
we're not done. And even if we had a report that said it could be done, we can't change it without the state board approval and a hearing process where other opinions can be put before it, and the state board will ultimately decide whether they think it's an allowed change or not. So we're not close to doing it yet. That's why there's a hearing mid next year, and then we'll know.
All right. Thanks for dealing with it.
Yeah, thank you, Don. Is there any other questions for Mr. Asias or his presentation? Mr. Scaroni.
You know, Steve Scaroni, Heber, California. Work took me to Salinas,ville last 3 or 4 months, but it's like I never left this donkey show. Came back, and it's the same characters. And David, the good thing about you is you're like a broken clock. You're right twice a day, and really appreciate that about you. First of all, it wasn't brought up today, but you know, I sat here for 2 hours and listened to David's BS presentation on Amendment 5. I asked this board if we could get another party, another economist who's not conflicted like David is with San Diego developers and water districts, and get us an honest evaluation, economic evaluation of Amendment 5. I mean, David laid down so much BS that day that, you know, the flies were everywhere. He starts sucking in a 98 agreement that never moved water, and I mean, it was just unbelievable. So, you know, I come back to you again, and I think you owe it to this community. I mean, I don't think this Amendment 5 economic impact has ever been clearly answered. I mean, David got in here and gave the auditors a very narrow scope of questions, and, you know, completely in his style. Like I've told you, David, you're scary smart. You manipulated the auditors to give you the information you want them to give, and, you know, we want an independent analysis, economic analysis of Amendment 5. Have Dumars do it. Now, as far as getting rid of Osias, that's really interesting, John Pierre, your comments, because I do want to read from the minutes of the October 2nd, 2003 board meeting. Thanks to the board for the 2 public hearings. You're always thanking people, John Pierre. You're such a polite guy. Against the transfer in its present form because we are transferring too much water out of the valley and not getting enough water. The directors who vote for the QSA will sell out the valley. Also, it's time to change the Dream Team. Dream Team? Yeah. Leader of the pack. They had their day in the sun. The Dream Team should assist but not in control of IID. Now that, you did say that October 2nd, 2003. I just want to make sure. And then there's also this ad. I love these iPads, man. This is so cool. David, you saw that ad, didn't you? What does it say? $88 million for what? It's got a great picture of John Pierre, no private water tank. Carter and the Dream Team must go. What else are they hiding? Did you ever, I guess you answered him because you guys are like buddies. So did you expose to him what you were hiding and now he's your buddy? I mean, John Pierre, This is your stuff, okay? So you're sitting here, you know, trying to make us villain farmers look like a bunch of, you know, money grubbers who want to ruin this valley. And you know, you're the one that said in 2003 that you wanted to get rid of this guy. And here it's 2012, and you guys are like, you know, no on Prop 8. I mean, you know what? I don't understand. John P., I don't know what, I mean, I wish you would someday explain to me this change in your, you know, thing. I mean, you know, it's like Obama saying he's going to, you know, cut the deficit. He doesn't do it. He said it's okay, but if Romney says something, he's a liar. Now, what is it, Jean-Pierre? Were you lying back then? Or were you confused and you're not confused now? Anyway, I digress. I did friend you on Facebook. Would you please hit OK, or really appreciate that.
The whole Facebook crashed when you did that.
Yeah, I didn't know if you're intentionally not friending, you know, accepting, or if just you haven't had time to catch up with your Facebook. But anyway, I appreciate if we could be friends at least on Facebook.
Tell Brenda to do it, and maybe I'll accept it.
Well, she has her own Facebook. You talk to her. Okay, so anyway, you know, you're sitting here, you know, slobbering over Mr. Osias about what a great attorney he is, but yet when Mr. Dumars is here and he presents this very extensively done report that, you know, we paid for through you guys, telling what a screwed up deal this QSA is, and you're sitting there slobbering, oh, Mr. Dumars, thank you very much, and, you know, you guys are slobbering over him, and it basically says that this guy sold you a bill of goods in that QSA. That's what the Dumars report says, but I'm just a dumb farmer from Heber, so I don't know, but that's what it says to me. Okay, let's talk about the QSA cases. Okay, David, one of the points you brought up was, you know, that somebody, and anyway, I do appreciate your characterizations of how these cases go. It would be interesting to maybe have somebody else from the other side come in, because I'm not sure, I mean, those are your editorialized characterizations of what the cases are about. And they are certainly to make your point about what a wonderful guy you are, and what a great attorney you are, and what a great service you're doing for the Imperial Valley and us. So I just want to make sure everybody understands that your version of what those cases are about are editorialized by you, who, as many times you have this conflict of interest. You know, the more you sue, and the more money you make, and all those things. So anyway, I just want to talk about that. Anyway, you talked about that there's the issue of that one party talks about the QSA not being valid. Are we talking about the meeting of the minds issue, where October 3rd, 2006, help me, you got this board approved the QSA, and then October 4th, 5th, and 6th, you guys flew up to Sacramento, and you guys changed a bunch of real significant things. And then the problem is, I haven't seen, and I keep asking Sutherland, and I've asked these guys, and they say they exist, but no one has produced me that document that says there was a closed door session that ratified, that the board here in 2003 ratified those significant changes you guys did up in Sacramento after the initial ratification. I've never seen, it's never been given to me. I know Sutherland says he doesn't have it. He's trying that part of the case. Is that what we're talking about when you talk about how some people say the QSA is not even a valid contract? Are you talking about the meeting of the minds issue?
So you probably forgot the format of the slide, but it said, this is what your side is accusing. So you can tell us what you're talking about.
Well, can we go back like slide 4 or 5? I mean, can someone get a picture of me and David here together?
This would be you. The
Okay,
the opposing parties.
Yeah, the QSA was never approved by IID.
This is what your side is
And then
saying.
no, but you're saying this is patently false.
Right.
Okay, but I think that would go away if you could produce the notice and the meeting records of that October meeting where the changes you guys made in Sacramento, especially regarding the state of California's position, was ratified by this board in closed session. That meeting, we can't find the notice. We've done the public records request, and we can't find those notices. I mean, well, I don't see anybody here that I think I'm right. I mean, am I wrong about that, or am I missing my dates here?
Bruce is back there. You can ask
Bruce,
him.
what do you think? Do I have the dates right? Anyway, so we're talking about the meeting of the minds there. So unless you guys can produce the notice for that closed door meeting ratifying those significant changes you made to the agreement that was already agreed upon by the board at that time, and the fact that you really had a closed door session to ratify that, well, I mean, I'm just a dumb farmer from Heber, but to me, that's an invalid contract. But anyway, that's just me. I'm just a dumb farmer from Heber. Okay, settlement status. You know, David, I know when us evildoers all meet and talk about, our litigation, we always talk about settlement because, we're not people that, we understand the cost of litigation, and we always talk to settlement. And, I realize, I call him Maloney Baloney, but he's a good guy. He tries. But I always ask him about, settlement. And they say, well, every time we ask, they rebuff us. Now, you show that list of all these people that are suing you. It's like, they're all a bunch of dumb farmers. I'm in that list. But these are guys who create the economy in this valley. And it's a lot more than 1%, by the way, JP. I know you got Bill Gates say it's just 1% that's after your butt, but it's a lot more than 1%. I think the June election proved that it's a lot more than 1%, and it's not just farmers. So anyway, that's cute the way you guys kind of move that thing around, you and Bill. So anyway, I lost my train of thought. See, this Alzheimer keeps kicking in, and I just keep losing my train of thought. So anyway, when can we? Let me move on here. I did lose my train of thought. I'm sorry. I get so wrapped up in my own fantasies. Okay. Have you guys, and I know the answer, I'm going to ask, I think it's a rhetorical question. Have you guys had an independent review of these lawsuits by someone besides Stu Somack and, someone that David's bought off, or have you had a really honest third-party review of these law cases? And David, I haven't been involved in a lot of lawsuits, but, I do piss people off sometimes, and I do occasionally get involved in a lawsuit or two. But every time I sit down with my attorneys, and here again, I'm just a dumb farmer from Heber, but, at this point in the cases, we start ranking the percentage of chance of win. And I thought that was a pretty common. In fact, I think you taught me that back when you were telling us back in the 90s that the farmers owned the water. So anyway, I think you were the one that told us that percentage of chance of win. Have you done that at least for the board, given them the percentage of chance of ultimately win these cases? Because on the QSA case, there's only been one issue decided. There's still a whole bunch of stuff that, you're not even 20% of the way there. You just, Candy it was just a constitutional issue. You make it sound like it's just like 5% to go. It's really 95% to go. So have you guys? Yeah,
Steve, you've got Larry Cox waiting and Rusty Jordan and some other people.
Well, they're all North Enders. Let them wait. Okay?
Oh, okay.
Let them wait. They're North Enders.
Oh, okay.
They got nothing else to do except go to the Del Rio and play golf. So, and David, you talked about.
Steve, you got about 3 more minutes, and that's it for you because we got other people waiting to talk.
Okay, will you friend me on Facebook, please?
You're not going to dominate the meeting, okay?
Okay, all right. It's too hot anyway. I'm going back to Salinas for a couple weeks, so I'll be out of your hair. Okay, David, you talked about this thing about the farmers say they own the water rights. You know where I heard that from? You, back in the 90s, buddy. You told us that. Remember when you were representing the farmers? You told us that and then would you please requote that thing about who owns the water right? Who holds the water is held in trust by whom, David? Would you please requote what you said here a few minutes ago? You said something about the water is held in trust for the community. I think you said that here in this meeting about 10 minutes ago. Would you please restate that?
Let me ask the board a question, because Steve, you've said a lot of things, several of them insulting, but not worthy of response. But
I resemble that statement, David.
You do.
And I'm going to go home and lose sleep over it, too.
David,
I don't think
let
so.
him talk,
but
Steve.
I do believe that it's relatively obvious to you, to me, to everyone in this room, that in the litigation that's pending.
Is he taking from my 3 minutes?
What? just,
In the litigation that's pending and in the litigation that's gone successfully for the IID, you've been on the other side, okay? And I am not here to answer questions that will help you in the litigation that remains. And I don't intend to. So you can conjure up these things and you can suggest that I've told you things. Okay, almost everything you've said is not true. But you've characterized it correctly, which is it's just your opinion, and you're entitled to have that. But lest people think you're reciting history accurately or case issues accurately, they can ask you later why you think that, and my client can ask me about handicapping or anything else in a closed session. But I'm not here to assist you in your continuing attacks on the Imperial Irrigation District.
Has he handicapped for you guys?
The question about the trust is really simply stated in the water code. It says an irrigation district holds all of its assets, including its water rights, in trust for its purposes. Okay? The its refers to the irrigation district. So what are its purposes? To deliver water to its customers, to generate power for its customers, and it holds its water rights in trust for that purpose. Okay?
I thought it was.
okay,
I thought it
Steve,
said,
that's it, okay?
David, you
No,
gave me
no,
3
Mr.
minutes,
Cox
JP.
is waiting,
You took
and
my
Mr.
3 minutes.
No, that's it for you. So we thank you for your time. You've had plenty of time. Larry Cox wants to come to the
Are you going
podium.
to friend me on Facebook or not, JP?
I'm not going to friend you on Facebook, so
You know,
thank you.
Thank you.
Mr.
Larry, you're
Scrone-
up next, please.
Mr. Scrone's requesting whether there was ever any settlement communications between his attorneys, Mr. Maloney and Mr. Versick and IID. When I came here in 2006, I was told by the board at that time to talk to Mr. Maloney, who was then more active than he is now with regard to settlement issues. I've now been at IID for almost 7 years. In the 7 years that I've been here, I've only seen one document that was ever provided to me by Mr. Maloney or Mr. Versick that laid out a settlement position. And it was a copy of a statement that they had provided to the state of California in the lawsuit, which the state agreed they could give to us. It's dated February 26, 2008, and I'd be happy to make it available. These are the points of the settlement. The federal government to change the Colorado River diversion cap from 3.1 to 3.4 million acre feet. No explanation as to how that would be done. Landowners get to set their own water rates. Landowners receive a per acre transfer fee. No explanation about how that would be financed. Unfunded, unspecified, but, quote, complete air liability protection to the valley, quote. Again, no explanation about how that would be managed. IID to undergo no large water or energy projects without landowner vote. Full Salton Sea restoration, no explanation as to how that would be performed. IID to pay up to 10% of Salton Sea restoration costs by selling off the electrical assets, but no energy rate increases. How would this be done? The landowners would vote to set rates and restructure district staff, and the final QSA settlement would be decided by landowner vote. No role of the IID board in that decision. That was the settlement offer.
So did you respond to that settlement offer, Mr. Garber? I mean,
Yes, I did. I took the settlement offer to the board. Yes, I did.
no, but did you respond to
Yes, I did.
Mr. Versick on that? Because I was just, a family member just settled a lawsuit once, and through mediation, through settlement. One side started at $3 million, the other started at $50,000. They ended up at $250,000. So, I mean, you know that's the way those things work, Jeff. Don't sit here and insult us and say, you know, this is the first round.
No, I don't know how it
Jeff,
works.
if anybody wants to sit down and have active settlement
Hey, Steve.
negotiations, I will work day and night to
Steve,
see that
Tell
happen.
me how it
You're
works, Mr.
done,
Scaroni.
okay?
You know
You've had
how-
your
you're an
time. You've
expert.
had your
You tell me
say.
how it
Thank you.
works.
So you are going to face me on Facebook? Are you gonna friend me?
Mr. Cox, you're up next.
Larry Cox, farmer, Brawley, North End. Steve, I don't think it's accurate that you're a dumb farmer from Heber. I question if you're a farmer. I do enjoy following Steve. It's usually pretty easy. They come off as not too aggressive. David, a couple questions. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I do believe that in either the first draft or one of the drafts that in the QSA that there was a prohibition against fallowing, and there was a requirement for landowner signups to validate the QSA, and if there was a lack of signups in the QSA, it would not be valid. Second question, on the on-farm conservation, we do have a fairly adversarial relationship with our board as a whole. I did oppose the QSA. I did think that Coachella and Metropolitan held this hostage and extorted cheap water and extension of Met 1. I did go to the Hertzberg hearings. I did speak out and advise the board to not sign the QSA if we did not have water banking or storage. I do think it's a flawed document. Could the consequences have been worse if we wouldn't have signed it? Possibly. I have been concerned about the price paid for water. I've been concerned that there's not enough money in this deal to allow us to conserve water on farm without having to be out there working our tails off for below cost. So that being said, we have had a fairly adversarial relationship with the board. There are a lot of us who are looking at this on-farm conservation probably with history and less than desirable, what you call it, tint on it. What happens if there is not enough sign-ups to conserve water on farm? Those are my two questions.
So the question parts, just to make sure I've got them. The first one had two parts. Was there a prohibition of fallowing in the original draft of the QSA versus the executed copy? And was there a condition in that same draft for farmer sign-up? The answer is yes, there was in that earlier draft.
Who took that out?
Nobody took that out. At the meetings you're talking about, it was negotiated away as a means of slowing down. Well, there's two parts. The fallowing was negotiated away as a means of slowing the impact on the Salton Sea to see if there was a chance for the state to come up with a restoration program during the 15 years. Non-fallowing has a more severe environmental impact than fallowing. As to the condition of farmer sign-up, there was no longer time to obtain it, given the pendency of the federal suit, where they took the 300, that wasn't 300, I think it was like 280,000 or something, away. We got a preliminary injunction to stop that, but that was temporary. And so in order to settle that lawsuit, there wasn't time to do the farmer subscription. So it was agreed to. It wasn't, quote, taken away. I think your second question had to do with farmer participation in conservation. And the restrictions in the QSA agreements are much less binding is not the right word, much less narrowly constructed than people seem to realize. The only two, you have to produce at least 130,000 out of the 300 by on-farm, and for the 200 to San Diego, after year 15, you can't do any by fallowing. So that's 200 of the 300 not by fallowing, and 130 of the 300 minimum on farm, and that's it. So the answer to your question is, depending upon how much farmers sign up for on farm, the district will figure out some other method for producing the conserved water that works, including either changing the program to get more signups, perhaps changing the price, perhaps doing more system, or some combination. Those are your two questions.
Well, yeah, but if the district doesn't get enough signups, they can't come up with more on a system. What if not enough water is produced? I mean, some things are principle, and they just say, hey, there's not enough money in this to do the on-farm conservation. We've done all the system conservation that we have. We're not making enough water.
So, I'm not sure I understand the parameters of your question per se, but if it's impossible, which is, pardon me? Does somebody have a suggestion?
Hey, Steve, knock it off, okay? No, you know what? You're getting out of hand, okay? We got to run an orderly meeting. Just be quiet. No. Go ahead, David.
So there are doctrines in law, the applicability of which to these contracts, I do not think is as simple as the question or the public discussion of it to date. A contract that's impossible to perform doesn't need to be performed. A contract that's undesirable to perform, if it's not performed, can be a breach. Now, I've put that in layman's terms, not technical terms, and it's a lot more complicated than that. So I'm not prepared to speculate with Mr. Cox on what happens if farmers don't sign up, because the legal consequences depend on far more than that, okay? I can tell you that, for example, if farmers choose not to sign up as a negotiating ploy to try to get something else, that won't be legally an excuse for non-performance, okay? The definition of impossibility is not that. But it's not an easy thing to discuss, nor do I think it's in the IID's best interest to broadcast what that definition is, because it will depend on the circumstances at the time. We don't hit on a ramp up 300,000 until the late 2020s, okay? So it's not like an all or nothing sign up now. And a lot of things have changed in the last 10 years, and a lot of things will change in the next 10 years that will probably affect the handicapping of the sign-up process and the handicapping of how much yield from efficiency, and even perhaps whether you wish to do any fouling or not, which is an IID board decision with respect to Coachella, not a contract decision. Okay, so despite the protestations from Mr. Scaroni or others, if he wants to read the Dumars report and be satisfied with that answer, that's his privilege. But I don't think, as your counsel discussing the specifics of this very complex subject in a predictive fashion for 20 years from now is in your best interest.
All right, thank you. Larry, and then Rusty, you're next, and then I'm going to have to cut this thing off because we've got other people here that are here for other business.
David, I do assume that this is it is a voluntary sign-up on farm.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Rusty.
Rusty Jordan Brawley.
Tony, we're gonna cut this thing off. Okay, go ahead, Rusty.
I just wanted to make a couple of comments. One is I did file myself a protest at the state board for the diversion only because I never saw the plan, so I didn't have an idea. And the way the structure of the system works, if you don't file a complaint, then if something's not right, you don't really have status to complain. I know that Al Kalin is environmental for the Farm Bureau, has many times discovered things that the district was going to do that they maybe were well thought out, but they weren't knowledgeable enough. The 218 lawsuit, I don't call it the same name as David Osias. There's some really sort of interesting things involved in that. One is no one that voted got to ever look at the counting of the votes. I look at Iran. I think that's the way they run that country. I didn't think that was the way we should run it. I know there's a reason. I just don't agree with the reason. There was also a population of the world and what it constitutes the number of votes. And do the people that don't pay water that's metered, they just get a flat amount of water, do they get to vote the same way the people that pay for water by the acre foot or cubic foot? And those things are being, I think that those are legitimate things to do. I'm not going to, the QSA is just too miry to ask. And I didn't think the 218 lawsuit was prosecuted by Alan Matkins. I thought it was Attorney Driscoll. Maybe you've taken over the appeal.
Driscoll handled the underlying, and all those issues were discussed during the trial, and Alan Matkins is handling the appeal.
And then
You're
when
right.
just last little aside, in the Driscoll case of the 218, the judge awarded attorney's fees to Morgan Holtz, and the district's appealing that.
The judge awarded partial fees on a limited issue. Yes, he did.
Okay, Rusty, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Tony, I'm going to start the clock. Gloria, would you please, so we limit this thing so we can move on.
You know, I see.
You got 5 minutes, Tony. That's it.
I see Mr. Scaroni up here, and he's got guts to talk the way he does, and I sometimes somehow respect him, but somehow question what he does, especially what he does to Mr. Osias, grabbing him by the shoulder and putting the thing in his face, and I don't know how you can take it, David. I really don't. I would have done something else myself, I think. But that's not here or there. That's how Steve is, and it's unfortunate that people like him come up here and even challenge that if the other two incumbents like Kuhn and Benson get in, they're going to fire Mr. Kelly and Mr. Garber. I've heard that. So we're just a few months away from knowing whether Mr. Osias and Mr. Garber and Mr. Kelly are going to be here, all because Kuhn and Benson are going to get in there and fire all these people. And Mr. Desert, I hope that you did. I'm not going to attack you. I'm not going to say nothing. You're a good friend of mine. Sometimes we speak at the podium and we disagree, but I still respect you. You know, I hope that you join us against this type of tyranny, this type of lies, these flyers that come out saying half-truths, if not all lies, because you don't stand for that, neither do you or Hanks. And I hope you join us in keeping Stella and keeping Mr. Menville in office, because how can you defend on people that lie about what they're going to do? How can you? I wasn't brought up that way. And there was 11 in our family. And all of us knew that we had to tell the truth. You know what? There's an old saying to love and fear God. You know why you love and fear God? Because when you fear God, you're for the injustices that happen to humanity. That's why you can say, well, how can you fear God? Well, you do fear God, believe me. Love and fear Him. And people say, well, you're talking about God, and then you're talking about people. Well, that's politics. Don't blame God for what I do. Blame me for what I do. But JP, I'm telling you, this is all about what Mr. Osias, either way, keep Mr. Osias and defend the people of this county to what he's done, defending the how many lawsuits? 9? Huh? 20 lawsuits. And a revenue loss of over $130 million that he's helped us, and they figure him out as a letdown, as a tyrant, as a moneymaker, as a puppet, as a broken clock that you have to rewind and wind again. That's not true. And Mr. Scaroni can say what he does. He has to respond to that, you know. But I don't think farmers are dumb. There might be one farmer that's dumb, but not all the other ones, you know. And to me, I'm a loss for words. You know, I'm a loss for words because you keep hearing the same thing over and over again, that the water rights belong to the farmers, and they don't. They belong to all of us, the farmers and the people. You know, they say, well, the farmers built the American Canal. Okay, without the Hoover Dam, there'd be no water flowing over here. So we could say, you keep the canal, and what are you going to get without Hoover Dam? Nothing. And the Hoover Dam belongs to the people too. And the American Canal belongs to the people, and so does the water belong to the people. Because you know why? It's a natural resource. Nobody made it. It's God-given. Just like the light, the air that we breathe, it's God-given. Pretty soon the farmers are going to say, well, because you live here, you're going to get a tax on the air we breathe and the light that shines upon us. You know, and it's not right, JP. It's not right, and it's not right, audience. You know, I come up here and I speak from my heart. I got no benefit on this except what's benefit for the people. And when I see Mr. Osias, a dignified man standing here, being ridiculed, being fun of, I say, Is he getting paid for that too, JP? Is he? Yeah, I guess so. But I tell you what, if it was me and that lawyer, I'd throw something back at Steve. You know, I wouldn't keep quiet, because he's got the right to do that. And what you said is better to keep quiet than try to answer the question or the insult. But I praise you, Mr. Ozai, and I hope you stay on. And that meeting last Thursday was all about you too, where you fired David Osias. Can you believe that? When you've defended us and you've helped us win in court, and they want to fire you? And be aware, these two gentlemen are here to help us too. I was once told, don't say too much about staff because they might get in trouble. Well, I'm not trying to get staff and anybody in trouble. I'm just saying that Mr. Kelly and Mr. Garber are for what the work they do is for the people too. It's for what's right. It's for dignified. It's for what happened over 100 years ago. And we want to keep it that way. And JP and the audience, I'm telling you, your two representatives, Kuhn and Benson, do not represent the people. They represent themselves. They represent the other farmers, not the dumb farmers, but the smart farmers. And if I were them, I would have all of you join us to vote for Stella and JP Menville. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Don. Mr. Havens, you got 5 minutes, and then we're going to cut this thing off.
Tom Havens, American Water Resources. I have an advanced degree in economics, and we're basically talking about an economic situation with water, the cost to conserve the water, and the price that it's being sold for. Hopefully, that could have been done on a cost-plus basis so that we wouldn't have a lot of the problems that we're currently having, with the fear that we might not be able to conserve the amount of water that's contractually obligated for the amount of money that we're going to receive. That's a problem. And I thank the board for having this hearing. David, could you put up the number 2, slide number 2?
I think this is slide number 2.
What are you looking for, Tom?
This one?
No, slide number 2 had to do with the petition. The amount of money you mentioned there is $61 million, and I just wanted a simple clarification on how much is that on a price per acre foot? The $61 million?
Greg, I don't remember. This is the price that we're paid for the mitigation water?
Well, it says right up there spending $61 million. How do you determine that?
Okay, so 4 parties to the QSA, 3 parties to the QSA, pardon me. San Diego, Coachella, and IID have each committed to sending the aggregate of $61 million to the JPA to spend on mitigation between 2014 and 2017.
And what's the criteria for that amount of money?
It's as a payment schedule in the contract. So it's a contract term to say, and it's not divided 3 ways evenly. That $61 million is raised from 2014 to 17 exclusively for mitigation purposes.
That's 480,000 acre feet in 2014 through 17 that wouldn't be going to the Salton Sea.
All right, so we're talking about a certain amount of water, and what my question was, what is the price per acre foot of the amount of water that you're using to come up with $61 million? I mean, I'm an economist, and I'd like to know what the value is, and who determined that value?
Your question is incorrect. That's the problem. The water's being transferred to San Diego for a price, and to Coachella for a different price. Those things you do know. This water is not being transferred to anyone. This is what's being paid to conserve it and put it in the sea, and the request is to stop doing that.
And the water that you're talking about, when you say this water, is water that's created in the Imperial Irrigation District, is that correct?
Only for mitigation purpose, not for transfer.
But it has to be created.
Well, unless the petition's granted, then it doesn't. The request is to get out of creating it.
If it does happen, how much does it cost to create that water, and what value are you putting on that water?
Okay, I'm not putting any value on it.
Well, I mean, $61 million?
Do the math that Kevin just said. Take 61 million divided by 480,000.
Yeah, what do we pay
on your calculator
for the mitigation water, I guess is the question.
Okay, so is it fair to say it's $100 an acre foot?
127 is what we paid for it?
127? Okay, $127 per acre foot. Do you know what the marginal cost of water is in San Diego today?
I think there's one point that's escaping you. And that is, we're trying to get out of this, not into this.
No, my question was, do you know the marginal cost of water in San Diego today?
Tom, this is not a debate over the cost of water. You asked him a question about the petition. We're not getting into water pricing here, okay?
Well, that's what it's all about, is the price of water. And I just asked him if he knew the price of...
This is going to the state board. It hasn't even got there yet. They may turn it down before it's
Will
over
you answer
with,
that
okay?
question? Do you know what the marginal cost of water is in San Diego? That's who we're selling the water to. That's a relevant question. That's an economic question.
I understand the question. Am I allowed to think about it, or should I just blurt something out?
Well, if you can't answer it, just tell me you can't answer it. You're an attorney. You may not legally be able to answer that question, and I'm an economist, and that's why I'm interested in that answer.
Right. What do you mean by the marginal cost?
Okay, the marginal cost of water in San Diego is the ultimate price that they pay for the next drop of water, which is currently $2,340.
Okay, no, that's the price they're going to pay if the desal plant is constructed.
That's called that's called the marginal price of water.
Have they ever paid that amount yet? Have they paid that amount yet, Mr.
David,
Havens?
that's fine. Director Desert has some questions, and then we're done on this issue. We're going to take a 5-minute break when we're done.
Yeah, David, first of all, I want you to know, David, that I've never been propositioned by anybody to fire you, regardless of what you've heard in a closed session or in the future, and that's for the audience to hear.
Okay, now let me say one thing. I had no idea my name was used in a debate.
Yeah.
The first I heard of it was here.
Yeah.
Okay, nor do I think I'm that much of a public figure that you ought to have this election be about me at all.
Right, and then, but David, you are a fabulously gifted attorney, and you win like nobody's business, without a doubt. And I think everyone will agree with that. The problem is water issues, and they divide us all. The value of the water, how do we get there, our environment, and unfortunately, in the political climate that we're in, it's breaking down to the point of those people want to take the water and keep it to themselves, rather than share it as somewhat of a public resource, or specifically a public resource that's held in trust. And it just isn't that simple, ladies and gentlemen. We're out here doing our best to get this thing put together. A QSA that no one on this board voted for, but has been upheld by this board and moved forward. And it's been amended and changed. And we've learned about it. As you learn about things in life, some 10 years have gone by now since the QSA has been signed. We're learning now that there's some financial shortcomings in regarding mitigation and assaultancy in the environment. And that's specifically what the water petition is about. And David, I want to ask you, the water petition will generate how much more money if we don't mitigate the sea without water, if we sell it and start doing projects?
Well, let me go back to that page. If we do nothing more than not put it into the sea, okay, then it'll generate 61 million for other projects.
Right.
If we then transfer some of it also, okay, then it depends on the price and the cost to generate it.
Right.
Okay.
And
neither of which are negotiated.
But the purpose that we're doing that is to make up for some perceived financial shortcomings of the environmental issues regarding the Salton Sea.
I think the purpose is sort of that, and that is it's to increase the probability of having plenty of money for mitigation, okay, and to start doing projects sooner that will last for the life of this transfer rather than having short-term benefits that go away.
Right.
Okay.
Sooner rather than later.
Sooner rather than later,
But
and more certainty that there's enough money.
More certainty. That it's also, if we're not able to sell this water to Met or someone, or the state doesn't, or Coachella doesn't go along with us to do this early mitigation, not early mitigation, excuse me, this water order change, then there's more certainty that we are going to have a financial shortcoming. See, it's very complex, everyone, and it isn't just black and white issues. And unfortunately, people get heated in battles and arguments and in law cases about what's going on. Unfortunately, sometimes humans represent themselves not in the best light, or that light's painted by others that are adverse to them. But everyone's got to know, if you're elected to this IID board, you have a genuine interest in doing what's right for the IID and the ratepayers and the community. And the issue is the Salton Sea. The issue is the mitigation of the Salton Sea and that impact from the water transfers that haven't fully been taken care of or thought out as 10 years have gone by. They were thought out at the beginning. So we've learned about this as it's moved forward. There's a lot of passion out there. And David, have you seen today of David? He's fabulously gifted. But it can be also fabulously gifted and frustrating when you're dealing with such a smart legal mind to regular minds or minds in the audience or community that don't seem to understand or want a definite answer or direction, because it just appears to us that the litigation goes on. We spent $70 million on litigation. We spent $130 million on litigation. We have insurance for that litigation. We don't have insurance for litigation. Who's going to pay? Who's not going to pay? And we're all very frustrated. And no more frustrated than any of these board members up here that have to take all your phone calls, take your emails, communicate with all of you, and try to do what's best. But it is hard. It is hard, and as long as we sit at this board, and I believe the other board members that aren't with us today, or Directors Mendoza and Menville, know it is difficult, especially as you're looking at an election coming up. You never know what the future holds. We never know what the future holds with the QSA, our representation, or where the IID stands with our other neighbors on the lower Colorado River, our metropolitan. But one thing's for sure is we'll be arguing about this and talking about it for a long time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Director Desert. Okay, David Osias, thank you for the presentation. We're going to take a short break, and then when we come back, we're going to go right into the informational on the solar number 10. I'll move that up so we can talk about it.